Welcome to Eye on the Illini Live. This is Mike Kegley. I am here today with Lance Allan, and we are going to do a preview for the Illinois football game this Saturday. Illinois is going to be visiting Wisconsin, and of course, Lance is the sports director at CBS 58 in Milwaukee. He's also on the Badgers radio network, which is interesting because unlike Illinois, which is a Learfield production, it is a Learfield and iHeartRadio production. So you're talking two big heavyweights there putting this show together. And we've got Lance Allan. We're doing this live. We've never done this before, but there's very few people who can tap dance around on live TV better than Lance can. So Lance, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Live without a net, it could get crazy, man. You better get that bleep button ready or whatever. That dump button ready.
Woo! Yes, we will get that ready. Of course, we might use some professional wrestling references because Lance and I both watch those shows with an intensity, and we will definitely bring that up. But Illini fans tune in on this, not just to hear wrestling opinions, but they do want to hear about the team that they are going to be facing this week. And I don't know if it was the announcement that Luke Fickell will be back, if it was just a little bit of just luck, but the team seems to be a little more focused than it was just 2 weeks ago.
It's pretty crazy, Mike, because I will say this, and it seems trite to say this, but I'll say it anyway, because I do believe it's true, is this team didn't quit. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, come on. Like, you know, that's like the least thing. Like, you play to win the game, to quote Herm Edwards. And then it's like, yeah, you know, everybody is trying out there or whatever. So it just seems like I'm not a participation ribbon type of guy, but I think you could see how the defense for the longest time was the one thing on this team that was good, or if not very good. And if they had any offense whatsoever, they could have pulled the upset against Oregon. And they did pull the upset against Washington. And they, quite frankly, just don't have the horsepower to match up against a number 2 team like Indiana. We all saw that last week. But they are basically a team that's so limited offensively that they basically get 1 touchdown a game. If you want to really break it down and be very simplistic about it, they can basically score about 1 touchdown a game, give or take. And defensively, they are very good, but the defense is human, and they're out on the field a lot, and eventually they're going to give something up. But they are a defensive team. And the announcement that Luke Fickell would be back seemed to – now, I will say this. You know, if you look at the video clips from the Washington upset, or you look at guys like Poza and Catalano and maybe some of these younger players that you're going to see on Saturday, they play hard for Luke Fickell. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, you know, I don't know if they have the firepower, quite honestly, to pull the upset against Illinois, but I will say that Illinois will still be in for a battle to a degree, and at least for a while, because this team will not quit.
Yeah, and I think this Illinois team is a good Illinois team, but I think they are good enough to beat just about anybody on their schedule, but they aren't so good that they can look past any team on their schedule. And I think this Wisconsin team is a dangerous team. I also think Brett Bielema, regardless of whether he says it or not, I do think it's a special game when he goes back and plays.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Wisconsin, you know.
Yeah. Look what they did to him. What was that, 2 years ago? You know, or a couple of years ago, when obviously Jim Leonard was, you know, like, well, actually, I should back up and say the Paul Chryst game.
Yes.
We kind of call it up here, where, you know, he Bielema, and it wasn't like he was running up the score. Illinois just physically manhandled Wisconsin, and you don't see that very often. And that was Paul Chryst's last game as Wisconsin head coach. So to me, it was a definite statement. And then, you know, I don't want to turn into the interviewer and you turn into the sidekick host or whatever. But my question to you, Mike, is: are people, like, it seemed like Illinois, and they were top 10 for a while, are Illini fans happy with this? Do they feel a little bit let down or disappointed? Because it seemed like Illinois had higher hopes, and I agree with you. I don't know if Wisconsin's got enough to legitimately pull it off on Saturday night, But let's just say if they have another defensive performance like what they had against Washington, get an extra turnover or two, control the clock, and just get enough plays, they could win a slugfest game like this. But are Illini fans happy with kind of the season that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely a rift. There's some Illini fans who certainly are frustrated. They think, well, you signed, you got all these guys to stay, and you end up 9-3, and the frustration level is, what could they have pulled one of those off? They certainly weren't going to beat Indiana that night.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but Indiana would have had to have a plane crash on top of them to lose. And of course, you're looking at something along the lines of having Ohio State. They're just, Illinois fans are talk about, well, we held them to the least amount of yards. Well, when you turn over the ball 4 times in your own territory, that tends to cut down the yards that the other team has to, go. And the game that everybody points to is Washington, because Illinois just basically didn't really rush the quarterback. They thought they could force him into making poor passes, and it didn't work. The 9 seconds to throw the ball is just, it just was, it was a rough game. So Illinois fans look at that, especially with all these losses going on in the SEC, and they're like, well, if we were, if we could finish 10-2, you might have a chance to go to the CFP. And you're not going to have a senior Luke Altmaier every year. You're not going to have Gabe Yakas, as a senior. You're not going to have returning starting line across the board. And so some fans are frustrated. But then you look at the vast majority of fans are so happy that Brett Bielema has made Illinois relevant again. Illinois has a chance to win. Well, now this is the first back-to-back season in quite some time, winning wise. I think you have to go back to the early '90s, Makovic era.
Makovic era. I was just going to say that, John. Yeah.
Yeah. So the majority of Illinois fans are, thank God Brett Bielema's here, and then there's a contingent like me that are saying, wouldn't it be great if you could somehow know how much these guys are spending on their rosters? Because I think Brett Bielema gets a heck of a lot more out of the $5 to $9 million that he's spending versus even Ryan Day gets out of the 35 that he's spending. And I do think it would be really good if they had. I don't think you can stop people from paying players. I just don't. We've seen over the years, from Bear Bryant, you name the great coach, there's always the rumors of the car, the box of money, this, that, and the other thing. But I do think it'd be great if you could just make them really transparent. If you're spending $33 million, then it should be number 1 ranked Ohio State, 33.0. Number 22 Wisconsin, 10.1. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And to me, that would give us a lot more insight, because it's really hard to figure out who your great coaches in college football are, because they spend more money, they have more opportunities to land talent. It's very different than the NFL, where you win a Super Bowl and you have to go down and pick 32nd.
Yep.
You look at the Packers' excellence over the last 25 years, you look at what the Patriots have done, and you have to give those coaches movement upwards, because they were always drafting behind all these teams that they beat, and yet they maintained their success. It's different in the world where you win a national title and, oh, by the way, you get the number 1 recruiting class.
Yeah.
So to me, it would be interesting to see that. And I know a lot of people are like, I talked to Ohio State media and they can't figure out there's no advantage to having a bigger payroll. I mean, it's like, seriously, but they've had 5 losing seasons in 75, so that's, you probably feel like it's a normal thing. But with Bielema, I think the majority of fans are probably pretty well, thinking that, okay, things are all right. Illinois is on the path. And my goodness, if they win the next 2 games and then win a bowl game, Illinois has never won double digits back to back ever.
Wow.
ever. And so you're like, well, gee, Brett Bielema's been here 5 years and he's done it twice. Okay, he's already, eclipsing. Now, will Illinois be able to maintain spending levels or increase levels to stay at the point they're at? Because Wisconsin apparently is going to spend more money. You have to think that UCLA is making rumbling that they're going to spend more money. Rutgers is saying, Shiano's saying we're raising more money. And certainly, Iowa doesn't want to be behind Illinois. So you start seeing this, and the money that you spend today may not be as much tomorrow. How do Wisconsin fans feel about the sudden road to Damascus here that McIntosh has figured out that I guess he has to spend money on football after this time?
I like the road to Damascus thing. He's been blinded by the light, kind of like Saul Paul.
NIL.
I like that. Yeah, I think, without saying it out loud, it probably speaks to the fact that Wisconsin didn't adapt as well as some other programs. I think that can be now clearly stated, even though there's not any maybe tangible, factual, completely proof of that, Mike. I just think you read the tea leaves and you look at between the lines and go, okay, well, they probably, if they're going to spend more, that means that from what I heard and from what I think a lot of people know that I would, trust their opinion is they weren't completely as maybe prepared as they should have been for the nil era. That Chris didn't really care for it. He wanted to coach the team and didn't want to deal with all the other stuff. And whether you want to say that they didn't have like a true GM in there to kind of do things, or they didn't have enough money and revenue coming in, which I had heard as well. And then you can't just completely rely on the way things used to be and reputation and things like that. So kind of all the above. And I think there are a lot of people that are still skeptical on the outside, but I do think that you noticed it, and I always am curious as to people who maybe don't look at Wisconsin all the time, or outsiders, or whatever, however you want to categorize that, is clearly this team. Yeah, Indiana is a much better team, but at least against Oregon and Washington, they were competitive, as opposed to just getting annihilated by a Maryland team at home to a coach that later on in the year got fired. I mean, that to me is the worst game of the year by far. Just that game right there is they had no chance almost from the jump against a team that's not even, quite frankly, that good. So, I think that now there are maybe at least some, even though a lot of Wisconsin fans are like, this year was terrible and this and that, or not renewing my tickets, or not going to as many games, or whatever the situation is. I do think there are some small signs of improvement of late. And they're not bowl eligible anymore. And I didn't think they would be, because I figured Indiana would take care of that. But they have a chance. And I'm a firm believer in this. A lot of people go, how on earth can you get momentum that carries over 8-9 months with younger people? So the pro ranks, you're paid to be a professional. And yes, you're paid now to play college ball, but there is still an emotional aspect to the game. And you can't tell me that a Cooper Catalado that I've known, from covering here in the Milwaukee area in high school, and Mason Poza, and some of these younger players, Carter Smith, all this stuff, whatever, that basically, if you win your last 2 games, I do think there is a little bit of a springboard, or a little bit of a trampoline type effect into spring ball and next year into August. I truly believe that. Some people are like, that's 2025, this is the 2026, a whole different animal. I do think that because they have players that will, in my opinion, barring something completely unforeseen, will be back next year. So I do think there are some building blocks, and they feel like, hey, we can beat Illinois or compete with Illinois, and we want the Axe back. So you got to have motivation of some type. And that's your biggest rival and your biggest trophy and your biggest rivalry game. Get the Axe back against Minnesota. You can win your last 2 games. Last time they won 2 games in a row was the non-conference season to start the year. I think that would be a big plus, in my opinion, for Wisconsin going forward.
Look, I think especially from years of coaching AAU, you got kids who are trying to decide where to go to school, And if they have their heart set on a place and that school has a rough year, but they finish the year with a couple 2-3 game winning streak, that gives them all the reason they want to say, you know what, I'm hitching a ride here because they're going in the right direction. So to me, that is a huge thing. And it's a lot easier, when you're talking to a kid about coming here in the portal, whether it's Illinois or Wisconsin. If you've had a good year and you've finished strong, that just is a reason to come and play and give somebody, it may not be their decision making, but it gives them another coin that they put on the scale to weigh towards your team. So I think that's so true. And I've been fascinated because I think Fickell's biggest issue was, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to do a different type of offense than what the team is known for. I mean, Bielema's running, more running offense than we've seen, and Illinois got famous under the Mike White, with all those great quarterbacks. But I just think Phil Longo, that hiring, it just didn't work. It didn't gel. And I just never understood trying to convert to different offense when your offensive line was there to just maul people and beat the snot out of them. And then to start playing a quick passing game. That's like basically saying, you know what, offensive linemen, you guys are now ballerinas and we're going to have you be you would never do that. And I thought that one hire put Fickell behind the 8 ball unintentionally, certainly. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but to me, if you change that hire, Luke Fickell's probably in a lot different position right now.
I agree. I agree with that. Yeah. A lot of times it's not as easy as this one thing or specifically, but I completely agree because it's a trickle down effect. You've heard rumblings, however level of truth you put on it, but, Fickell not recruiting Wisconsin as vehemently as what, Barry Alvarez famously saying, we're going to build a wall or build a fence around Wisconsin. And basically almost not every, but close to it, like every top recruit and every really good player, and let's face facts, there are a lot of people in Wisconsin that are big people. And as Barry Alvarez used to say, the big palookas. So the one thing that is consistent in the Neal era is, you are true to, you're going to have at least a handful of kids that are more interested in the name on the front of the jersey than on the name on the back. And those 300-pound, corn-fed, good old farm kids or whatever you want to say, all of a sudden they're like zone blocking and read and then out in space and whatever. To me, it didn't make total sense. I know that you can't completely play 1993 football or whatever era you want to talk about, but you have to change somewhat with the times. And I thought Bielema, of all people, when he was at Wisconsin, look at how many times routinely that they put 40, 50 points up in a game. I mean, it was amazing how he adapted to the newer style pro offense, spread, whatever you want to say, but yet kept the offensive linemen and just some of the other parts that they had. That's what they need to get back to, and that's what they attempted to do to a degree. But I think quite frankly, they missed, as you said, a recruiting class or two, and a lot of good Wisconsin talent went to other schools that should be playing, with the Motion W on their helmet.
Yeah, we would love to see more of those linemen come down to Illinois. And for the life of me, Bielema has not recruited the offense and defensive line as well as he has some other positions. Like he's done pretty good at wide receiver, which who knew? But I got to.
He's a former defensive lineman at Iowa, so you'd think that would be kind of a natural. Yeah.
Well, and he's put more offensive linemen in the NFL than any college coach. And to me, it's like if I was a 4 or 5 star lineman, and I'm trying to figure out how I make myself one of the 3 out of 100 college players who's in the NFL, I look to a guy like Brett Bielema and go, well, he knows how to coach my position. I think I'm going to go there and see if I can make it into the NFL. But that certainly hasn't been a huge thing. And I wonder just how good this Illini team could be if he had the dollars to pursue a few of those linemen. Because, it doesn't take, more than just a couple dominant linemen to make your quarterback and your running backs look a lot better than maybe they really are.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about it.
So speaking of great offense, Give me a little bit about talk a little bit about the Wisconsin offense and maybe start at the quarterback and give Illini fans some idea of they're going to be facing this week.
So, what's crazy is, and people are going to come, they don't know me as well, so they're going to come, I'm going to come off as a shill or an excuse maker or whatever, but it is what it is. The quarterback currently now was fourth string on the depth chart, Mike. I mean, it was Billy Edwards and, and Danny O'Neill. And then all of a sudden you go to Hunter Simmons, and then finally you bring the freshman out, the freshman that a lot of people have talked about because he's a four-star kid or whatever. And then you've got a four-star running back or fourth string, I should say, not four-star, fourth string running back in Gideon Atuka. That's what he was on the depth chart when the season started. And I don't even think he's going to play because that was, thank goodness, the injury report or the report on him is better than what it looked on Saturday. When you see somebody get stretchered off, that's a horrible, and both teams on the field. But I'm not a doctor, but just looking at it, I'm like, well, he's probably going to take at least another week off. You would think, even though there's actual update. So who are they going to even play at running back? And then you've got Lance Mason, who was a guy that came in super late. Like, I don't know if you remember the whole story about how they had a guy on campus literally for like a day or two, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. Lance Mason's one of these guys that comes in at the last minute, and he's been like a godsend. Like, he's actually looked like he's a legitimate tight end. He had the one touchdown last week that, plays well, things like that. And yeah, it's pieces and parts, and they've had, they're down to at one point last week, I think they were down to their fourth string center, their fourth string quarterback, and their fourth string running back. So, like, how many teams are going to do well and function well in that? Once again, I'm not waving pom-poms for Luke Fickell. I'm just talking what's on the number sheet and facts, So, I think their hopes were definitely higher than, for this season. But it's also been just a myriad of injuries and a myriad of, moving things around offensively, and they just never got any real identity going on offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously it's hard to get an identity with their third or fourth string quarterback. Your identity is survive through the end of the game. Look at this, I made it.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and to your point, if there is an upset, this guy can make plays. He made play with his legs that won the Washington game. He had the running touchdown, and then they have to rely. They're not talented enough to do it consistently. I think once again, third downs, it was 2 for 11, and then they had 2 for 2 on fourth downs. But you're going to live and die by trying to convert fourth downs, in my opinion, all the time. Even though I know coaches roll the dice a little more now than they used to. But bottom line, Mike, is the teams that do fake field goals, fake punts. Sean West, God bless him, another kid that I covered here in the high school area in Milwaukee. But the punter converts a third and long or a fourth and long, and then the punter is your leading passer against Washington, but yet they win the game. You don't want to live by that. But you know what I mean is at least now they have a quarterback that made a play with his legs. Last week it was a little bit of a trickeration type play, but they caught everybody napping and get him a little more confident. 9 of 15, not great numbers, 98 yards. Get him a little more confident. Probably doesn't know the full playbook, things like that. And at least they're building, in my opinion, it's slow, steady progress, and they're building the foundation for the future.
Yeah. One question on that offensive line, just how good are they? We're used to, of course, I'm old enough to remember when Wisconsin was an automatic W in the Morton years, and I like that better. I'm going to be real frank with you. As an Illini fan, it was nice in the 80s, like, oh, good, Wisconsin, that's a W. But we don't see those anymore. But we have learned to fear those Wisconsin offensive lines. Is this one in development, or is this one that's going to transition to the next generation?
Yeah, they've got a few freshmen and younger players on this offensive line. So I do think that they have at least some elements of it. But kind of like what I hinted to before is, even the local newspaper here did a story on, what type of connections does Fickell have recruiting-wise to the high school coaches in the state? And I think it's very mixed, Mike, in my opinion. So, and I think I'm not reading into the article. I think the article kind of stated that. So I do think that, yeah, sometimes when you're changing things, you're not going to get every kid in Wisconsin. You're probably going to tick somebody off. But I also think that they would do themselves a favor by probably building a few more bridges. The kids that were overlooked for years and years and years, offensive linemen that, were no stars or one star or whatever you want to say. And I think the list is pretty lengthy for, going all the way back to my era of the Joe Panos era, where he was the captain of the Rose Bowl team. But there are kids in this state that still bleed red. They still want to be, no matter what the nil deal is, no matter what is involved, they want to play for the University of Wisconsin. I think it would behoove Luke Fickell and his staff to build better bridges in the offseason to unearth some of these hidden gem type kids that could be the Badger offensive linemen of the future.
Yeah, and that certainly is a fair comment. Especially Illinois had to live through that with the Lovie Smith era, where Lovie just was not at all, didn't seem to be too interested in recruiting the Illinois high school area. At least not if it did, not if they didn't come to Champaign and make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
One quick thing though, just wanted to tell you that Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. What do data brokers do? Well, your name, your contact information, social security number, home address, even information about your family members, Lance, could all be compiled by data brokers and sold online. Have you ever been a victim of identity theft, harassment, doxing? If you haven't, you probably know somebody who has, and Delete Me can help. Take control of your data, keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special rate for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to deleteme.com/hit and use promo code HIT at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/hit and enter code HIT at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/hit, code HIT. Thank you to the folks at Delete Me. And certainly you want to delete me and not have to worry about it, get Delete Me.
You want me to go into the witness protection program? That's
exactly. I know, and I do like the use of the word "hit" from when we're talking football all the time. It's pretty good. So if you take a look then at the defense, that's where all of a sudden this team looks a lot tougher. And I would tell Illini fans, you say, well, they lost 31-7. It's like, yeah, because the offense did nothing all game, and that 31 points could have been a heck of a lot worse. What is Illinois going to look? What are they going to expect from this defense? What's Brett Bielema running tape on and trying to figure out how he stops certain guys? Who are they?
Brett always had a lot of times in like either his era or shortly after that with Jimmy Leonard when he was here, and you saw what the Broncos did with the Chiefs. I think that was partially give credit where credit's due, that Jim Leonard knows how to coordinate a defense and do certain things. So they always put the athletes at linebacker, and you still see them spread out over the NFL, Mike, in the era of T.J. Watt with the Steelers, or Zach Bond. Look what he did with the Eagles, or Leo Chanel with the Chiefs, and I could go on and on and on. There are a number of Badgers linebackers, and that was the hidden thing. Was everybody thought of the Badgers as three or 4 yards in a cloud of dust. But one of the underrated, hidden things was that they put a lot of athletes. Zach Bond was a quarterback in high school. T.J. Watt was a tight end. A lot of these guys were running backs. I think Leo Chanel was a running back. They put them, some of their best athletes at linebacker, and just turned them loose. And whether it was outside or inside, they made plays. And you're getting back to that. And I like seeing that. Like Mason Posa and Cooper Catalano. Like Mason Posa last week had 12 total tackles and a sack. And the week before said game time and had the key sack to end the game against Washington. And I think he was, freshman of the week for the Big Ten, or newcomer of the year, whatever week, or whatever the award exactly is. And then Cooper Catalano is, great character kid off the field, because I know him, from being from the Milwaukee area, and then 19 tackles against Washington. It was like, if you've ever seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where it's Jefferson, literally it was Catalano. He was all over the field. And last week, I kind of sarcastically said, "Hey Cooper, what's your problem?" Because he only had 5 tackles, and I believe 1 or 2 of those were for tackles for loss, or a sack or 2. I mean, he didn't even have quite the stat line or even close to the stat line yet, and he still made plays. So that's where they have true freshmen that are making plays. And then to my previous point, you have the Ben Bartons of the world, who's from Stratford, you small town Wisconsin kid, and Daryl Peterson. Daryl Peterson last week had 2.5 sacks. And I think that most people would be like, okay, if you look at the pass rush, they don't have a lot of great pass rushers, but they have guys that are high motor guys isn't even doing them credit. Like they play hard and they're not going to give up and they're not going to just mail it in. It's not going to be the U.S. Postal Service lick a stamp, mail it in performance of the week. It's just not going to. And I even said it on the post-game show last week that none of these guys are going to be high draft picks next year, the Ben Bartons and Daryl Petersons of the world. But I will say this, Mike, and we've seen far fewer NFL scouts at games in the press box than we've seen in recent years. I will guarantee you that one of those guys, if you drafted them in the 7th round or even a high priority undrafted rookie free agent, that those guys will be in a locker room next year in the NFL. And it's the type of guy that NFL coaches will want. And it's the type of guys that, Keanu Benton, was I was out covering Packers Steelers, and he's on the Steelers, and he's out there, never going to wow you, but he's out there plays and things like that. And same thing with these guys. Like, they are guys that you want in your locker room because they are not going to say, just because we're 3-7, we're done for the year and we'll just go through the motions. It will not be that way. And their front seven, like last year, they got pushed around and they got out physical. This year, it's been relatively rare that the front seven has gotten gashed. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So when we look at the special teams, anything stand out there in special teams?
And what's funny is Sean West, as I mentioned, like leading passer one week and the run, whatever. That's not what you want. They've had some kicks blocked and they've had some deficiencies on special teams, but special teams has also flipped the field for them. Vakos is a good, I would say good, but not great kicker. And I think that they've got, some elements of good special teams play. It's just they're not good enough to consistently, pull it off and pin you deep and make you pay.
Yeah. So how do you see the game going if you were just going to hypothesize?
I think, under the lights at Camp Randall, we've seen freaky, spooky things, so this night game atmosphere, I know the Big Ten Network, that's why they jumped on this one, even though it's not a marquee matchup. I think it's another, bow your neck, get your knuckles ready and good old fashioned Big Ten slugfest. And if it's more the, kind of like what we saw against Washington, if it's the 16-13, 13-10, whatever type variety, then you lean a little more Wisconsin. But Wisconsin is very limited offensively. Like I said, they only score 1 touchdown a game. If they get 2, then they're a threat because that's good. So if Illinois scores 3 touchdowns, they win. That's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I got to ask you a couple questions here. What are your thoughts on the wrapping up of John Cena's illustrious career?
Now we get into the real sports.
Now we get into the real talk.
The last honest American sport left.
Yes.
I guess the short version is, Mike, that what would have been the second greatest heel turn next to Hogan in the NWO, and when it happened, I was like, oh my word, when Cena turned or whatever, and you knew he was going to go back to being a good guy, a face before he was done. I thought it was awesome. And then they completely dropped the ball because The Rock went off and did his Hollywood thing.
Because The Rock got mad and left, right?
Correct. So what would have been the second greatest heel turn, arguably in wrestling history, they just botched it. There have been elements where I like the fact that Cena has had some really classic wrestling matches down the stretch, and I think that's been cool. And then you would hope to see a couple of greatest hits and hope to see, some fun stuff as they go forward. So that's my hope anyway.
Yeah. I was, he's a guy, I've never been a huge Cena wrestling fan, but as a man, who is willing to spend those times. I mean, they've had to create different categories of Make-A-Wish because he's done so many. I think before he got there, I think the record was 200, and now I think he's over like 600, something like that.
I know he's over 500 for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean,
and to your point, Mike, like, it's amazing what he's done, because I have witnessed, one of the quiet things about Brett Favre, whether you liked him or didn't like him, is his mother was a special ed teacher. So he always had a special affinity for kids that were, a little more, what do you want to say, down and out or got
challenged
or whatever. And he would meet kids, whether it was on the field quietly or whether it was even up the tunnel. And I witnessed this. Like the team exits the field 20 to 30 minutes before game time, and he would meet with a kid in a wheelchair or meet with a kid literally like as they were going into the locker room for the pre-hype speech. And he would take pictures and say hi to the kid, whatever. And he didn't want cameras around. Like, I witnessed my own eyes, but he wasn't doing it for the publicity. Let's put it. And so for John Cena to do that, which, I know Make-A-Wish, like, they want to say, like, hey, you use your platform for good. And I'm always of the type of person, Mike, where I'm like, charity should be your left hand should know what your right hand's doing. Most of the time, my wife and I do stuff, and we don't want people knowing that we're involved or whatever. But if a Make-A-Wish Foundation gets they raise their profile because John Cena is a part of it, then I'm okay with a couple of pictures or a little bit of video or whatever, or Brett Favre, whomever. It's amazing.
Now, did the wrestling world, did they do too much with Roman Reigns and were too successful that now everything seems like a little anticlimactic after I mean, I almost think you got to get the tribal chief back, and you got to get him to go after all the people who've been masquerading in his name.
Well, we don't know because they don't release health details like his leukemia battle and some of the thing. And he's a big family guy or whatever, but he is on all the WrestleMania ads, and he's at the poker table, and the poker table is Cody Rhodes, it's Roman Reigns, it's CM Punk, and it's Brock Lesnar. And obviously, so they have big plans for those four individuals. So going forward, at some point, Roman Reigns will be a big part of it. So you'll get your wish, my friend.
Yeah, and I'm worried my guy Seth Rollins is just cursed with the injury bug.
He almost works too hard, if there's such a thing. Like he puts his body and puts stuff on the line so much that he just gets himself injured. But hey, being a Bears fan, that's sometimes what you get, Mike.
Well, the last thing I got to say is Jake Paul, is he going to wish that Gervonta Davis didn't back out of this? Because I'm not certain he's going to leave on 2 feet against Anthony Joshua.
I thought you were going to say something about the other Paul.
Logan? Yeah,
Logan, because obviously, he's actually a pretty good wrestler.
I agree. Yeah.
But you're right. Like, I don't know what to make. Let's just say this. When I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, I mean, my dad liked boxing, watching some of, and I realized boxing had warts and problems or whatever. Yeah. But Mike Tyson, or the other day, it was the anniversary of the Hagler-Hearns fight, which is arguably, like, you go back and watch that first round, it's the greatest first round in the history of boxing.
April 15th, 1986, I believe.
Yeah.
What a
Sugar Ray Leonard, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Of the Larry Holmes was so underrated, and just Evander Holyfield, I love that guy, all heart, whatever. Like, to me, I still like a good boxing match or whatever, but now it's just kind of like, well, how much of this is, I'm not the one in the ring taking the hits, so I'm not going to say it's not real, but sometimes you sit there and go, really, like, Jake Paul or somebody couldn't take a swing, and I don't know.
I tend to think world. I tend to think he if you couldn't handle Tommy Fury, I mean, AJ could kill him. It just depends, though. Is he gonna do the Conor McGregor when Whitaker carried him, and made sure he got through the 12 rounds? But if I just look at how hard AJ hits, and if Jake Paul runs into one of those, woof, I don't know but hey, $40 million or whatever he's going to make, maybe it's worth it.
Maybe it's worth it. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, because I tell you what I would do. I would take on Mike Tyson for 40 million.
Yeah,
I'd be the first guy who ever got knocked out at the touching of gloves, but still, nonetheless, we'd tap gloves and
yeah.
down I go.
Well, and wasn't it 25 to 30 million, which wasn't chump change, at Jerry World or whatever, and then you get the speculation of a couple of times Tyson did catch him, and part of it's age, like obviously what he used to be, but part of it was like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, did I get you too much? Okay, we're just having a boxing. I don't know how much is true and how much isn't. I don't know.
Celebrity boxing will be the death of the sport.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's sad but true. Yeah.
Well, folks, we want to thank Lance Allan for coming on. He has always been a fantastic guest on Eye on the Illini or on the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. And we thank him so much for being here. I think this is going to be a closer game than Illini fans would like. I still think the Illini will come out because I do think Luke Altmaier can put 3 touchdowns on the board.
Yep.
And I think that, folks, we got 3 games left with Luke Altmaier. Please enjoy each and every one, because this type of kid with this heart and this talent, that combination, it just doesn't grow on trees. And we were very spoiled in my generation when you had Dave Wilson, you had Tony Eason, you had Jack Trudeau, and you had Jeff George. And you're thinking, hey, this whole football game is a pretty cool thing with these quarterbacks. You don't get them every once in a while, but for every once in a while. And of course, it's been a while since Illinois has had a guy like, I think he fits up there with Kurt Kittner and Nathan Shielhouse. And I think Luke Altmaier is putting his thumbprint on the Illinois record book, but only a few more games left. So appreciate him. Thanks, Lance, for coming on today.
No problem, Mike, and I agree with you. I think Illinois will probably – this is coming from the Wisconsin guy. I think Illinois will probably get that 3rd touchdown and win 24-16 or something relatively close. I honestly don't think Wisconsin's going to get blown out, but you're right. If they get that 3rd touchdown, it's going to be extremely hard for the Badgers to overcome that.
Yeah, let's all cross our fingers. Thank you very much, Lance, and of course for you Illini Guy fans. We're going to be on Wednesday night. We're going to be live at halftime and after the game for the Alabama game up at the United Center. And then, of course, we will be back on Saturday night, halftime and after the game for the Wisconsin game. This should be a lot of fun. This is what Illinois has done under Brett Bielema. They have actually become relevant in the month of November, which for a decade and a half, they were not. So it is such a great thing. And we are so appreciative of the way that things are going. And hopefully Illinois can do that march to 9-3. But until next time, folks, go Illini.